So hi, good afternoon. Audible? So your class has shifted to the original place. एक वीक के लिए उधर था ना बीच में? सिर्फ एक दिन के लिए? अच्छा, चलो. So I think last class what we practiced. Last class already we have seen. So we have seen till 1784. So the remaining portion we will see today, and then after we will talk about the police and then their judiciary, their army, their civil services. So the next one, just listen. So 1784 we have mentioned, okay? In fact, that this what last portion that we have mentioned in the 1784 was the Governor General. It was decided that next Governor General would be given the veto power. So actually there was one amendment in 1786 which gave this veto power, okay? And in fact, it was Cornwallis who demanded for this veto power. So that's why it was given. But after the departure of the Cornwallis, it was further extended to everyone. One more thing which we have not written in 1784 was, just give me 1 minute. So it was that moreover the number of the executive members in the Governor General Council, it was 4. It was reduced to 3, so that if Governor General gets the support of one person, so then what happens? He can get his way. But the problem was that still these 3 people were ganging together. Okay? So they were ganging together and he was not getting. That's why in 1785, Cornwallis demanded this particular veto power. Okay? So इसके analysis में हमें सिर्फ एक part लिखना है. We have not written something related to analysis. So just mention few things. Analysis करके लिख लो and then you write. Mention. The corruption was still intact. The corruption was still intact. Still intact. And a nebulous 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 connection developed between the court of directors and board of control, over the period. ठीक है? Then number 2 you write, still there was no effective mechanism. Still there was no effective mechanism to control the affairs of company. ठीक है? Affairs of company. So this is it. इसके beyond लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है. Now, so 1793, the Charter Act of the 1793. So just listen that what was there in the Charter Act of the 1793. So the Charter Act of the 1793, it further renewed, ठीक है? It further renewed the charter of the company for next 20 years, ठीक है? So next 20 years. Then another provision of the Charter Act of 1793 was that it called for that the governance based on the written laws, not on the personal law of the rulers. Okay? So governance based on the written laws, not on the personal rule of the past rulers. Moreover, it said that all the laws related to the rights of the persons, okay, and their immunities, they must be translated and it must be written in the vernacular or the local languages, so that people must know about their rights and immunities. Okay? So they are calling for writing the law and moreover translating that law into the local languages. Are you feeling too cold right now? मुझे भी लग रही है. I need that. You have that, but okay. So just ask them. आज पता नहीं आज 16-17 कर दिया I think. ठीक है? कितना है? Is it visible the temperature of this one? चलो I'll shift my chair meanwhile here. So the next provision was that it was said that the salaries of the Governor General and his council, now it will not be paid from the British Exchequer, but it has to be paid from the Indian revenues. Okay? So these were the main provisions. Then we will move to the next one, which is important. So first you write, mention Charter Act of 1793. Charter Act of 1793. And in this you write, number 1, it renewed the company's charter. It renewed the company's charter for next 20 years. Company's charter for next 20 years. Then next you write, it called for governance based on written laws. It called for governance based on written laws. Full stop. It further maintained that there must be the end of personal rule of the rulers. Personal rule of the rulers. Next point. Next mention. It called for the translation of written laws, in vernacular languages. Translation of written laws in vernacular languages, so that people may know about their rights and immunities. People may know about their rights and immunities. Their rights and immunities. Next point. It further maintained that the salaries of Governor General and his council, will be paid from the Indian revenues, and not the British Exchequer, British Exchequer. ठीक है? Done? Then after this one, British Exchequer. So this is about the Act of the 1793. Now the important one is the 1813. So listen little bit about the importance of this 1813 Charter Act. So just listen. So background of this 1813, here analysis is not required, nothing is there. Okay? So in fact, in the terms of analysis, you can say that basically what they have started the rule based on the written law. So same word you will be repeating in the significance. So you don't need to repeat. So 1813 Charter Act, what was the background and what was the environment at this point of time? So the Industrial Revolution has picked up its pace in the Britain. Okay? Just listen the overall background. And moreover, in 1789, when the French Revolution has happened. Okay? So after the French Revolution, there was rise of Napoleon in the France. And France and Britain were dire enemies. Okay? So they were dire enemies, and at the same point of time, Napoleon, when his rise started to happen, so he came up with a continental system. You will be reading this in your world history syllabus. So continental system. Now, as per this continental system, the majority of the countries in Europe, they joined this continental system. Okay? And it was against the bloc of the Britain. Moreover, in 1806 and 1807, Napoleon issued Decree of Berlin and Milan. Okay? So Decree of Berlin and Milan, and as per these two decrees, he forbade the trade with the British. Okay? So he forbade the trade with British. So now the entire European market was cut for the Britain. Okay? And it is at the height of the climax of the Industrial Revolution. Okay? So there are n number of the manufactured goods which were produced in the Britain, and now the European market is completely cut, except one or two countries completely cut. Then what about India? So these European industrialist manufacturers, they can sell it in India, but this option was also not available to them, because in India there was monopoly of this company. Okay? British East India Company. So it's a one company which has monopolized the Indian trade and trade with the China. Okay? So these British corporate people, industrialist people, they started to pressurize the British Parliament that the monopoly of this company must end from India, and we must also be allowed to go to India to practice these all. Okay? So to sell our products. So this was one such background. Another thing, that this is also the time when one of the very famous thinker from the European part of world, Adam Smith, I hope you must have heard his name. So Adam Smith and his laissez-faire theory. Okay? So what is laissez-faire? Free trade theory. Okay? So free trade theory was becoming very popular. So this free trade theory was popular, and as we have also discussed at the time of the Bengal, that Sirajuddaulah was in favor of this one, that no one would be given the monopoly of trade, everybody must compete, and that's how a better market would be there, and then it will be ultimately in the interest of the end customers. So here laissez-faire was also becoming popular, and the British industrialists, they pressurized the British Parliament. So now British Parliament, in the helm of these all affairs, they have come up with the Charter Act of the 1813. So what were the tenets, or what were the components of the Charter Act of the 1813? So first of all, the very first one, that it abolished the privileges of the company from India. So the company's monopoly of trade from India, it ended. Okay? Except two places, that is the tea trade and trade with China. Okay? So company retained its monopoly of trade with China and tea trade in India. But in all the other spheres, its monopoly has ended. Then another thing, that is basically the it allocated rupees 1 lakh. Okay? So it allocated rupees 1 lakh annually for the promotion of education in India. But one more thing, that from the Charter Act of the 1813, it was said that the British paramountcy would be established in India. So let's have a little bit of discussion on the British paramountcy. In fact, in the later episodes, after completion of these all topics, we will talk about the different phases of the colonialism in the princely states, where we once again talk about the paramountcy. So what is paramountcy? This term I think we have used earlier also, but from here on, they will become subordinate. Okay? So basically what they are trying to do, that all the Indian powers would be subordinate to the British authority. Okay? Nobody is an equal power. Okay? So earlier there was equal power. Okay? that there is a Maratha, there is a Bengal, so and Mysore. So they were kind of that British when they got the Diwani right, so they became equal power to these all people. But from here onwards, when they have annexed all these states, so smaller kingdoms are there. So now British have maintained that from here onwards, every princely states will in India will have to accept its subordinate status, and British power will be paramount. So 1813 onwards, this was their goal. And one more thing, okay? This is the act which allowed the Christian missionaries to come to India, settle here, and do the propagation of Christianity. Okay? Mention. So background mention karo. First you write Charter Act of 1813. Charter Act of 1813. And in this you mention Charter Act of 1813. So background would be the first topic, and you write by 1800, industrial revolution picked up pace. Industrial revolution picked up pace in Britain. Picked up pace in Britain. Then next you write moreover large number of manufacturers and manufactured goods emerged. Then you write, this was also the time remote control चाहिए AC का, हाँ, time there was rise of Napoleon. This is also the time that there was rise of Napoleon in France. Then you mention Napoleon created continental system. Napoleon created continental system in Europe in which majority of the European countries were member. Majority of the European countries were member. ठीक है? Further, right? He issued decree, DECREE. He issued decree of Berlin in 1806. Decree of Berlin in 1806 and decree of Milan in 1807. Decree of Milan in 1807. You mention whereby he forbade trade with Britain. He forbade trade with Britain. ठीक है? Now, so after full stop you write, now the European market was nearly cut. European market was nearly cut for British manufacturers. And they did not had any access. They did not had any access to any access to India and China. India and China. Full stop. They demanded to end the company's monopoly. To end the company's monopoly at these two places. At these two places. Then next you write at these two places. Moreover, their claims were supported by laissez-faire theory. Just 1 minute. Oh, it's wrong. Don't write. Laissez-faire theory of Adam Smith. Laissez-faire theory of Adam Smith, which became very popular at this point of time. So what is this laissez-faire? Free trade theory. Take it? Free trade theory. So this is the background. Take it? So now we can mention the provisions you can write. Provisions. So number 1, take it? It declared that British power would be paramount. And the Indian powers or princely states will have subordinate status. Done. Number 2. It renewed the company's charter. For next 20 years. But it ended the company's monopoly of trade. In India. Except in tea trade. And trade with China. Then trade with China. Then, so this is one part. Then next you write, mention. It allocated rupees 1 lakh. On annual basis for the promotion of education and Western sciences among Indian subjects. So this money which was allocated, it was not made available easily. Okay? In fact, after when the announcement is there, so for many years there was a stalemate which continued, that how this money should be used, as if they have given 1 crore rupees. Okay? Only 1 lakh rupees, and that too for the education of the entire Indians. Okay? And moreover, what was the debate at this point of time? That they started to debate that how this money should be used to educate Indians in English medium or in the vernacular languages. ठीक है? So somewhere in 1820s, finally, for the first time, 1 lakh rupees was made available, and then still the debate continued. So it's only at the time of the William Bentinck that it was solved. So we will write this part not here, but later on in the development of education. Okay? So there we, in a detailed fashion, we mention this episode. Now further you write, next one. It allowed the Christian missionaries, to go to India and propagate Christianity under a license. Propagate Christianity under a license. So basically these Christian missionaries, they are taking a license from their government to come to India, and then here they are entitled to propagate Christianity. Then, so see that Anglican church will tell you that, हाँ Anglican, ठीक है? So Catholics भी थे, Anglican भी थे, world में Protestant थे, ठीक है? So it's all about the Anglican only. They are not talking about the Catholics, ठीक है? And that is the world when there was a clear-cut divide. In fact, this is the time, I think 1700 to 1800, that was the rise of the Protestants, ठीक है? So it was Anglican. Then what all things we have mentioned, ठीक है? So Christian missionaries, इसके अलावा कुछ mention किया था मैंने? No. So that's fine. Yes. So yes. Yes. These. Yes. There is no such clarity regarding that. ठीक है? There is no such clarity regarding, and I don't think that this is important also, because see that the things which are mentioned in the books, that is only this much, but not specifically that which country, which particular area they belong to, and moreover majority of the that areas in the British part, like Ireland, they were the colonies of the Britain, so they might be from that areas also. Okay? So now the next one after this one, 1813, is the Charter Act of the 1833. So out of all the Charter Acts, this was the most important. Okay? And not only from the perspective of British, but also from the perspective of our exam. So the Charter Act of the 1833. So this is the time when William Bentinck was the Governor General of India. Okay? He was Governor General, and he will become the Governor General of India. So first of all, listen, the Charter Act of the 1833, basically it is that its background is also the continuation of the background of the Industrial Revolution. So the demands of the British industrialists, they further need to be fulfilled. They were demanding the complete abolition of this particular company's monopoly. So very first thing, okay, that it completely abolished the trade monopoly of company, including the tea trade and also the trade with China. Then the company's charter was renewed for next 20 years, but the company was asked to wind up its commercial business as soon as possible. Jitni jaldi ho sake utna possible. So they have been instructed that you need to wind up your commercial business. So as I hope you know that they had a political function over here. That political function was the revenue collection, and they had a commercial function. Commercial was their original function for which they have come to India. So since it was not a profitable venture, so there is no need of continuation of this particular venture when it is not profitable. So they asked that as soon as possible you wind up the commercial business. Okay? That is one instruction. But the important part of this act is that the section 37 of the act, listen, section 37 of the act, it called for the education and employment of Indians. Okay? So education and employment of Indians, it further maintained that in the sphere of the employment of Indians, there would not be any discrimination on the basis of the grounds I'm mentioning. So religion, region, caste, descent and place of birth. ठीक है? So 5 things. ठीक है? Region, religion, place of birth, caste and descent. ठीक है? So on these matters there would not be any discrimination. So it means that there could be discrimination on the other grounds. For example, on the basis of the sex, ठीक है? Gender, there could be a discrimination, men or women के बीच में. So on other grounds it can happen, but not on this ground. Then accordingly, ठीक है? Accordingly, Indian Law Commission, first Indian Law Commission was established at this point of time. ठीक है? So the chairman of the Indian Law Commission, the first chairman of the Indian Law Commission was Macaulay. ठीक है? Then this Indian Law Commission which was appointed, it was interested with the task of codifying some of the codes of India, like Indian Penal Code, IPC, CRPC, so Criminal and Civil Procedure Code, ठीक है? So these they needed to codify. Then the Governor General Council, ठीक है? The Governor General Council which was there, in this council one expert of law was to be added, ठीक है? Or basically you can say a legislative member was to be added, ठीक है? So a person who was a legal expert, he was to be added into the Governor General Council and his functions were completely legislative, ठीक है? So his functions were completely legislative and he did not had a permanent status in the council but temporary status only for the rule making, ठीक है? And the first member, once again it was Macaulay, ठीक है? So once again it was Macaulay. Then the act also called for the creation of the Agra presidency from the existing Bengal presidency, ठीक है? So it called for the creation of a separate Agra presidency. And then the Governor General of the British Indian Territory, now he was to be designated as the Governor General of India, ठीक है? So from here onwards the term Governor General of India would be used, ठीक है? And William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India. We will further talk about his powers. First you write few things. So mention that it ended the company's monopoly of trade. It ended the company's monopoly of trade in India and China. In India and China. Full stop. Next point. Though the company's charter was renewed for next 20 years, but they were asked to wind up their commercial business as soon as possible. They were asked to wind up their commercial business as soon as possible. As soon as possible. Then, now one more you add, before going into the section 37, I just want to add one more provision at the third place. So it lifted the legal barrier. लिखो नहीं, पहले सुन लो, फिर then लिखना. So it lifted the legal barrier on the colonization of India. So now this is a new thing that we are talking, that legal barrier on the colonization of India. What does it mean? लिखने में तो समझ में आ रहा है, लेकिन what is the meaning of this one? So earlier, only the people associated with the British East India Company, they were allowed to come to India and settle for a long time. But otherwise, if any British person wants to come to India, so he will come as a visitor and he will have to go. He cannot settle over here. So only the company employees were living at this place. Water dropping? अब उसमें मैं कुछ नहीं कर पाऊंगा. No, I saw literally falling on you. ठीक है? So चलो इसको, वैसे तो चेयर्स खाली हो तो चेयर्स चेंज कर सकते हो तुम लोग, अगर जो इफ़ यू विश टू, ठीक है. Otherwise, there is no solution of this one because this is too humid outside also, inside also, and that's why it is happening. So इसका एक ही solution है that we must bring down the temperature. ठीक है, बहुत कम, 16-17. कंबल लेके आए होते तो चल जाता. So what we were talking about. So earlier, only the people associated with the company, they were allowed to settle for a longer period of time, okay? But not the common British man. They were allowed, they can come as a visitor, they can travel all over India, but they will have to go back. So now it lifted this legal barrier, and now India was ready for the colonization. Okay? Meaning that any British, anyone who wants, come buy property here and then live here forever. Okay? So this is actually the 1813 is the one which has marked the beginning of the establishment of the British paramountcy, and by 1833 this act formally consolidated it. Okay? So that is the third feature you write. So you write, it lifted the legal barrier. It lifted the legal barrier in colonization of India. In colonization of India. Then next point you mention section 37, point number 4. Section 37 of the Act, section 37 of the Act provided avenue for education and employment of Indians, education and employments of Indians in public sector. ठीक है. It further added there would not be any discrimination on the basis of religion, caste, region, place of birth, and descent. Then you mention comma, in the matters of, there will not be any discrimination on the grounds of, ठीक है, on the matters of employment and promotion. In the matters of employment and promotion. Done? Next point. It called for establishment of Indian Law Commission. Establishment of Indian Law Commission to codify the law. As such, Indian Penal Code, IPC, as such, Indian Penal Code, IPC, and Civil and Criminal Procedure Code, CRPC, was enacted. EN, not IN. ठीक है? Enacted. Done? Then next point you write. Accordingly, one law member or legal expert was to be added in Governor General's Council. In Governor General's Council. Full stop. His functions were limited to rule making. His functions were limited to rule making, and he was not entitled as a permanent member. ठीक है? Then you write a note after this one. Note. In note you mention Macaulay was the first chairman. Macaulay was the first chairman of Law Commission. First chairman of Law Commission and first legislative member of Governor General's Council. Then now listen. The next few provisions, though already I have mentioned one, but add a few more. So listen. So what we mentioned after this one, that Agra was to be created, and then we mentioned about the Governor General of the British Indian Territory became the Governor General of India. Okay? So this is the time when the centralization has happened, and then William Bentinck, who was the first Governor General of India, can also be said till this point of time he was the most powerful Governor General. Okay? Now all the financial powers were lodged in Governor General and his council. Moreover, he had immense powers. So what are these powers? So these powers were that he can repeal, amend or alter any law or regulation. Once again, I'm repeating that he had immense power, which includes that he can amend, repeal or alter any law or regulation. The only condition on him that it must be approved by Court of Directors who are acting under Board of Control. So only they are the one who can disapprove, but there is no one else who can disapprove his actions. Then the act also called for upliftment of slaves in India. Okay? And one last provision, that they are looking at the Indian society, what is the setup, and then what is the family setup. So basically by this point of time, as you know, even till this point of time, you go to the rural area, joint family is a tradition. Okay? So in joint family, as you know, that everybody who lives in a joint family, they accept the authority of the Karta. Okay? Who is Karta? The eldest male member of the family. Okay? So what it said that while drafting any law, okay, respect the laws of marriage in India and also the rights of the heads of families in India. Okay? So their rights must also be respected. So this is what was mentioned in this particular act, which is very elaborate. So you write. It called for, next point. Next point. Okay? Point number, I have forgotten what is the number, so you guys can mention. 7. Okay? So 7 number likho. It called for creation of a separate presidency of Agra. It called for creation of a separate presidency of Agra. Done? Then next you write. The Governor General of British Indian Territory the Governor General of British Indian Territory now became Governor General of India. Now became Governor General of India. Then next you write William Bentinck. William Bentinck was the first Governor General. William Bentinck was the first Governor General. Done? Then, next point. All the financial powers were lodged in the hand of Governor General, and his council. Full stop. He could repeal, amend, or alter. He could repeal, amend, or alter any law or regulation. Any law or regulation. Okay, any law or regulation. Then next you mention, no, in the same regulation. The only condition was that it must be approved by Court of Directors. Court of Directors who were acting under Board of Control. Board of Control. Okay? So Board of Control. Right? So this is what is about the few part. There are two more you need to add. कैसे याद करोगे तुम लोग इसको? See, but you will be able to remember it. I feel that if I am able to remember it, I also feel very challenged when I was preparing, and then these acts and commissions, I was like, बिना इसके नहीं हो जाएगा, ठीक है? So then I realized that in every year paper it is there. So when you decide in your mind, actually first battle you win in your mind, and then it's all yours, ठीक है? So at the very first instance, if it seems tough to you, so it will be tougher, ठीक है? It will elude you, ठीक है? But when you have decided, no matter what, I will remember it, you will be able to memorize it like a very smooth passage, ठीक है? So things will look interconnected to you, but when you have detested it, it will seem very tough, ठीक है? Let's be less philosophical, right? So mention it called for upliftment of slaves in India. Upliftment of slaves in India. दोनों एक ही चीज होता है. स्लेवरी का अपलिफ्टमेंट नहीं होता है, स्लेव्स का अपलिफ्टमेंट होता है. स्लेवरी का एबोलिशन होता है, ठीक है? दोनों ठीक है, राइट? अपलिफ्टमेंट ऑफ स्लेव्स इन इंडिया. देन यू राइट next one. See, you asked a good question. Why I'm saying? Because what he said, that abolition of slavery and upliftment of slaves, there is a hell lot of difference between the two words. When we say abolition of slavery, meaning that slavery khatam kar do, so how Britishers will take the indentured labor from India to the South Africa? So they don't want to end that. They have taken a lot of indentured labor from India to South Africa, to Sri Lankan plantations, to Fiji, Mauritius, Maldives, ठीक है? These all places. So they are very careful in their words, and that's why English is a very beautiful language, ठीक है? गाली भी दे दो, सामने वाले को पता भी ना चले, ठीक है? So and in our language, गाली का मतलब गाली. We call a spade as a spade, ठीक है? So here, so that is the difference. So they are calling for the upliftment of slaves, which means that slaves will be slaves. earlier they were 12 years a slave, now they will be always a slave, ठीक है. But हाँ थोड़े से perks बढ़ा दिए, पैसे दे दिए, ठीक है, तुम्हारे लिए एक अच्छा सा घर बना देंगे. So these all kind of promises, ठीक है. You will not be treated in inhumane way. So these type of the things were proposed in this one. Now the last one you write. So it further mentioned that while drafting any law, the rights of heads of families and the traditional marriage laws must be respected. Traditional marriage laws must be respected. Then, so this is what is all about this Charter Act of the 1833. ठीक है, थोड़ी देर रुक जाओ तुम लोग, क्योंकि इट्स वेरी फ्रीक्वेंट इंटरप्शन, थोड़ा सा मतलब फ्लो खत्म होता है. सो लेट मी कंप्लीट द पार्ट. So now significance of this particular act, ठीक है. So what is the significance of this particular act? Here we are not saying analysis but significance. So in many ways it was very significant for the British East India Company, company only. So first of all, that it was a watershed moment in the Indian history, ठीक है. And why it is a watershed moment, which means important thing. So first of all, that it has led to the codification of the laws, ठीक है. So now we can say that formally that the country's governance would be based on the written laws. And see that whenever there are written laws, so there is no such role of discretion, or very less role of discretion. Whenever there was a personal rule of a person, so there was always a possibility that miscarriage of justice can happen, ठीक है. But in the written laws, it is based on that only, and one can contest also, ठीक है. Suppose that British are discriminating, they have exploited, but if it is written law, so then aware citizenry can contest that, ठीक है. So this is important thing. The second was that it has initiated the centralization of the Indian administration, ठीक है. And since we say that Lord William Bentinck was the most powerful Governor General, so it is because of the centralization tendency, because all the powers were centralized in his hand, ठीक है. In fact, the name Governor General of India itself is indicative of the centralizing tendency. Then what else we can note down from this one? It was very clear, ठीक है, that from the act it was very much indicated that companies rule, ठीक है, companies rule is not there for a long time, ठीक है, since it has already been asked that you wind up your commercial business. So now company remained as a political unit in India, ठीक है, not as a commercial unit. Then another very important thing was that it is calling for the increased participation of Indians into the public sphere or public sector employment. Then another importance of this act was that for the first time they recognized that executive and what else? Legislative functions must be separate, ठीक है. So executive and legislative functions must be separate. So this is what they have done, ठीक है. Right, significance of the act. Significance of the act. In this you mention, number 1, with the codification of IPC and CRPC, with the codification of IPC and CRPC, the process of adjudication, EAD. See, this is a common term which you'll be using many a times. So I expect that once I have written this, so you have memorized it. process of adjudication was formalized. Formalized. ठीक है? This act is considered as, next point, this act is considered as watershed movement. Watershed movement. ठीक है? Full stop. It led to the centralization of Indian administration. Centralization of Indian administration. Administration. Then you mentioned, after this what I mentioned, the company was no more a commercial entity, but only a political body. Then next one. For the first time, it was recognized that executive and legislative functions are separate. ठीक है? Then next point, last point you mentioned. For the first time it was mentioned to freely admit Indians in administration without discrimination. Done? So this is what is the significance of this particular act of the 1833. Okay? So now we are at the last one. I'll give you a little bit of time after completing last one so that you can revise. Okay? So last class, did we practice the revision? Okay? So here also we will do. So now the last one you write, the Charter Act of 1853. The Charter Act of 1853. And what is the class number today? 9. Okay. So 9, 10. Okay. So then mention Charter Act of the 1853. So listen, number 1. So once again, the charter was renewed. The company's charter, basically, it is renewed, but for the very first time, no time limit was fixed. ठीक है? इसके पहले जितनी बार renew हुआ, the time limit was given. ठीक है? 20 year. Generally, it was happening in 20 year way. So 1773 20 year, 93 20 year, 1813 20 year, and so as 1833. So for the first time, the no time limit was mentioned, okay? Which is indicative that very soon the company could be asked to wind up its operation from India, political operations also, okay? Then the another thing, that there was a creation of a separate Governor General Legislative Council, okay? So earlier, in the previous one, only one member was added to the already existing council. But from here onwards, they are going to create a separate council, Governor General Legislative Council, okay? So there is already a Governor General Executive Council and then Legislative Council. I hope you know the functions, differences between the legislation and execution. I hope you know. पॉलिटी हो गया स्टार्ट क्लास में. सो आई होप दैट इतना तो पता होगा कि यू गाइज आर प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर द यूपीएससी, दैट व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन द एग्जीक्यूटिव, लेजिस्लेटिव एंड देन जुडिशरी. ठीक है? So now these functions are separate. Then out with that, in this Governor General Legislative Council, 6 new members were to be added. Okay? Out of these 6 new members, local representation started. So what is this local representation? The word seems to be indicating towards local means that कि Indians को incorporate करेंगे. No, it was not about the Indians. So out of these 6 members who were to be added in the Governor General Legislative Council, 4 were to be nominated by the local governments. Okay? And which local governments? Bombay, Madras, Bengal, and Agra. Okay? So they would be recommending the people. And who would be that people? So it was mentioned that those people who have completed at least 10 years of service in the British East India Company, they were entitled to be nominated. Okay? So only the company servants who have completed at least 10 years, they were entitled to be nominated. Okay? So that was the local representation. Then this act called for the open competitive system of recruitment for the covenanted civil services. Okay? So open competitive system of recruitment for the covenanted civil servants, and it was thrown open to Indians also. Okay? In this regard, the Macaulay Committee, okay? See that Macaulay is not dying very soon. Often he would be there in many committees. Okay? So a Macaulay Committee was constituted to create the scheme and the how exam will happen. But there is a time when we further talk about the Macaulay, but I just want to share something about him at this point of time. He was one person who was imperialist to the core, okay? And then moreover, he was the one who was instrumental in many changes at this point of time, particularly in favor of the English. Then, so what he did, long back in 1835, we will write this part in the education, not here, but just listen. So a committee was created in his name, okay? And he was the one who settled the dispute between that what should be the mode of education. So there were Orientalists and then also Englishist. So some were saying that vernacular language, Anglicists are saying English language. So he made a statement in the British Parliament. And what was his statement? So he made a statement that the entire Indian knowledge system, okay? Whatever that has been mentioned in the entire Indian knowledge system and the entire Indian textual tradition can be very much found in one book which is kept on the shelf of the London Library. So he demeaned the Indian education, Indian textual tradition by just saying that it can be summarized only in one book which is kept in the London Library. And here London Library meant more than lakhs and lakhs of book. Okay? So he reduced our education system to this much, and that's how he got his way. So William Bentinck has supported his view, and then finally English became the official language of India in 1835. That's already we have mentioned. So it became official language of India, and that's why many a times when at uncommon places, when you start speaking in English, so people, those who are old, they will say, Macaulay ki aulad hai. ठीक है? So, so नहीं करना ऐसा. एयरपोर्ट पे जाके ना लोग ना अचानक से एक्सेंट चेंज हो जाता है. लोग अंग्रेजी घुसते ही अंग्रेजी बोलना स्टार्ट कर देते हैं. So, look at the person in the language in which he is okay. Conversate in that language. कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है हर जगह इंग्लिश बोलने की. In fact, I will tell you my own experience. See, and that we were 2 friends then, and we were talking in English, and then one foreigner was also there. He was our colleague then. So then he commented that why the hell you guys talk in foreign language? Why don't you talk in your own language? Then see that we talk in our own language, but why you guys don't talk in your own language? So then we said that you are right, but actually we don't have one common language. He's a Telugu and I'm a Hindi belt. So ये भी एक problem है कि हमें English का use करना पड़ता है, ठीक है? So then he understood, but the point is right. Then the point is right that when the people belonging to same regions, ठीक है, if they are not conversating in their own vernacular language, their own mother tongue, so that is something which is not right. ठीक है? And be proud of whatever your origins are, whatever your roots are. ठीक है? You are today because of your roots. Then You would have been nothing without your roots. So respect that. First, respect must be according to our roots. Okay? So anyways, so this is Macaulay. This is what he mentioned. And this is how he got his way. And moreover, ye civil services wala bhi suno. After this only, we are going to talk about the civil services. So since he was the chairman of this committee of the civil services exam, he made the syllabus so difficult that Indians must not clear the exam. And syllabus included the Latin and the Greek subjects also. So Latin and Greek subjects also, which is actually very difficult. Somehow we started learning English and then we became very good at English. But now he is introducing an alien subject, Greek and Latin subjects. So it was very difficult. So soon after, when the exam was thrown open to Indians, 1 or 2 years there was no Indian in the Indian who cleared the exam. But in 1864, Satyendra Nath Tagore, he was the first person to clear this exam. Okay? And then onwards, every year 2-3 Indians were clearing the exam. Second person probably, I'm not saying it with the conformity, I will check, but as I know, Surendranath Banerjee was the second person who cleared the exam. Okay? So, and then onwards, n number of the people cleared the exam. But one more problem was that exam was not conducted in India. It was conducted in Britain only. So only rich people can afford to give the exam, those who can go to England and then give the exam. So mention, you're right. So how many things we mentioned? 4-5 mention kiya hai na? So rest of the things I'll mention later. First you write this much. So though the company charter, mention number 1, though the company charter was renewed, but for the first time, no time limit was fixed. For the first time, no time limit was fixed. No time limit was fixed. Done? Then next you write, it created a separate Governor General Legislative Council. A separate Governor General Legislative Council with 6 new members. Done? Then further you write, it started the local representation in Legislative Council. Full stop. Out of 6 new members, 4 were to be appointed by the local governments of Bombay, Bengal, Madras and Agra. Full stop. Write in the same statement. Moreover, those company employees who have completed tenure in the company service were entitled to be nominated. Full stop. Done? So this is what we talked about, and one more, that is civil services. So you write that. Next you write, it maintained it maintained that the covenanted civil services, covenanted, let me write the spelling. So covenanted civil services will be thrown open to Indians, and there would be open competitive recruitment of civil servant. In this regard, open competitive recruitment of civil servant, ठीक है? In this regard, Macaulay Committee was constituted. ठीक है? Then you mention note. Satyendra Nath Tagore was the first Indian. Satyendra Nath Tagore was the first Indian to clear this exam in 1864. ठीक है? Done? Then now listen few more things related to it. So what else happened? So the court of directors, what was their number? 24. ठीक है? Now their numbers were reduced to just 18, and out of these 18, 6 were to be nominated by the British Crown. ठीक है? Please mention. It reduced the number of court of directors from 24 to 18, out of which 6 were to be appointed by the British Crown or Parliament, you can mention, by the British Crown or Parliament. So this is what is all about the Act. So Charter Act of the 1853. So its significance, okay? So this is the last one, its significance. So now it was very clear from the Act that the company's rule is not going to last longer. Okay? So the company's rule is not going to last longer because there is no time limit which is mentioned. Okay? And the second one, what is that? Can you see that? What is the second important feature in this one? कुछ तो बोलो, पढ़ लिया इतना कुछ. What is it? Yes. So that civil services would be thrown open to Indians. So at least there was a ray of hope that in the upper services that Indians will be recruited. Okay? And one more very important thing, that it initiated the parliamentary system of governance in India. Okay? So what is this parliamentary system? Executive Council and Legislative Council. Okay? So you're right, significance. And first one you mentioned. It was very clear from the Act. That company's rule is not going to last longer. Company's rule is not going to last longer. ठीक है? The word which we have used, covenanted, what is the meaning of this one? Which one? Reputed. उसके अलावा कुछ हो सकता है? Yes? No. See that covenanted was, see that, just listen, okay? So covenanted means that earlier there was no exam. एक बार ध्यान से समझना. Earlier there was no exam. The recruitment to the civil services were not happening on the basis of exam. It was a recruitment on the basis of that screening, ठीक है? And on the screening, a recommendation by the court of director. So they had this right of appointment. So covenant is a kind of agreement, ठीक है? So that is what we are calling covenanted civil services, ठीक है? So there was this agreement, ठीक है? And moreover, that was that, court of directors had the right to appoint them. So that system is called as the covenanted. But जब open civil services exam होगा, so calling it covenanted would not be right. Though this term will continue for long time. Only in, I think 1919, ठीक है? There was a commission, Montfort. So after its recommendation, the word covenanted would be removed. Okay? So abhi ke baad it will not be covenanted, but the term continued. Okay? So that is the meaning of the word covenanted. Then you write second feature. So it initiated parliamentary system of functioning in India. It initiated parliamentary system of functioning in India. Okay? And then the last one you write, for the first time, there was a ray of hope. There was a ray of hope that Indians would be the part of higher administration. Indians would be the part of higher administration. Done? So that is what is all about this particular act. So today in continuation we have covered large that how many 93 13 4 cover किया है ठीक है. So just take 2.5 minutes for the revision of the 93 and 1813 background also. Start from 1793. So the 2.5 minutes for the first act over. Next 2.5 for the last two act. Then I'll ask questions to you. अभी बाद में let them revise. This is revision period. Wait. So I would ask few questions in solvo, meaning that one person who will be ready to give the answer, I'll ask 4-5 questions in continuation to the same person. Okay? Yes. So it will be different from the previous class. Okay? So yeah, from the front only, whoever wants to raise your hand. I'll ask 4-5 questions in solvo. Dare. Yes, good. So tell the background of the 1813, and moreover, just listen to the question. Tell the background of the 1813 and what was the problem of the British industrialist at this point of time. But why they were cut off from the India and China? Because of the decree. Let him answer this thing, okay? Okay. So that's second thing that you said, that the British were not, that British manufacturer, they were not able to come to India because the decree prevented. No. The British East India Company has monopolized, that it was given the monopoly of the trade from India, so that's why they were not able to come. Okay? Now the second thing, that what was the major feature of the Charter Act of the 1813? Major highlight. Very good. So next question, that from where you can trace the journey of the written law. समझ ही नहीं आया. ओके मुझे लगा कि यू आर सेइंग समझ ही नहीं आया. Good that you have attempted. देखो, when the person is answering ना, so it's easy for us. अरे ये तो गलत हो गया. खुद तो हाथ उठाओ, ठीक है? तब तो सही बोलोगे. It's good that you made a very brave and good attempt, ठीक है? Now, the second person from this side, ठीक है? So raise your hand. Who would be there? There. Dead. Dare or dead? You're raising your hand. आधे मन से नहीं, पूरा उठाओ. ठीक है? So let's start with you. So tell me the origin, from which particular act we can trace the origin of the written laws. यहीं से start करते हैं. 1793. ठीक है? Then what else was mentioned in the 1793 regarding the laws? Yes. Personal law. And what do you mean by personal law? Arbitrariness. Chalo, good. Then tell me that the feature, the act which has empowered the Governor General. ठीक है. So what were the powers of the Governor General at this point of time? Okay. Okay. No, चलो आगे बताओ, ठीक है? What else were the powers of the Governor General? चलो कोई नहीं. From this side. So one last, we'll ask. From this side, raise hand. I am expecting that from this side, 4 or 5 people will raise their hand. अरे मैं खुद नहीं उठाऊंगा, मतलब तुम लोग का हाथ पकड़ के. You guys need to raise your hand. ठीक है? कोई नहीं. Dead. Chalo, good. So now, tell some of the provisions of the Act of 1773. Since this is the last, yes, there would be a twist in the tale, obviously. Then, yes, good. Chalo. So then, which act started the joint rule of the British Crown and British Parliament? You don't. Which act initiated the joint rule of the British Parliament and the British Crown? No, sorry, British East India Company and the British East India Company and British Crown. These two. 70? No, it hasn't been asked to you guys. You guys have not raised your hands. Then 1784. Okay? Then tell me the next provision. The most important provision of the 1853. You will have to prioritize. I'm just looking at that which particular feature you finding as the most important. Okay. So you are attaching it. Now let's make a survey. Which particular feature of the 1853 you consider as the most important? Civil services, then allowing Indians into the services, parliamentary system. Take care. See that the very first one, that since that I asked this question because this notion goes with everyone that the company's rule is not going to last longer. But that does that mean that India will become free? So it's not a most important provision. Only the first exploiter will be replaced by the second exploiter, okay, with a mask, okay, and that is the mask of beneficence. Then, so that is not the most important feature. What is important is the parliamentary system, okay. So parliamentary system. What was the goal? What goal was achieved by 1947? The parliamentary system. So this is the most important thing which has happened at this point of time. Even if you have to quote something important from the 1833, so you will be quoting the three provisions, the codification of the laws, IPC and CRPC. Even till today, that our today's IPC is very much based on the IPC which was created in 1860. Okay? CRPC is also like the same. So these two were the important provisions. And then also the creation, that the recognition of the executive functions with the legislative functions. So what is the problem? That when the two functions are combined with a one person, so what is the problem? Misuse of power. Very good, exactly. So it is misuse of power, that and centralization of the authority. And with the centralization of authority and power, it becomes dictatorial. So when the functions are separated, so the dictatorial aspirations of the people and the people in power, it is curbed. So that is the importance of this one. So these questions, basically, they are asked to you from the perspective that if you get a question in mains examination, so you must be able to prioritize, think on the lines that what is most important, what could be the lesser important, then, and what could be much less important. Okay? So do that in that way. So now we are going to start the new one, the new topic. You write Pillars of British Administration. Pillars of British Administration. Pillars of British Administration. So first we will start with the civil services. So listen. So when it comes to the civil services, okay, basically the word civil which we are using here, it is basically used to distinguish between the military, commercial and the naval functions of the company. So companies there in India, the most important is the commercial function of the company. Okay? Originally, all these companies, including the Dutch, French, everyone, they have come to India for the trade and business. Okay? So that is most important. And for the trade and business, they have created an army, small army in the beginning to safeguard their commercial interest. An army, and with army also the navy. Okay? So this is what they have created. Now, so their naval functions are different from the military functions, and military functions are different from the commercial functions. So it was basically indicated for commercial functions. Okay? So it is indicating to the commercial functions of the company, not the naval function, not the military function. Then Cornwallis, okay? So Cornwallis, who was the Governor General in between 1785 to 1793, was the creator of the modern civil services in India. Okay? So earlier, before him also, the civil servants were appointed. But who appointed? So they were appointed by the Court of Directors. Even till this date, they would be appointed by the Court of Directors. Okay? So Court of Directors were appointing. But this appointment by the Court of Director has led to a hell lot of favoritism and nepotism. Okay? So you understand that what is favoritism. That nears and dears ones, they are appointed, their own son, their own relatives, their own friends, they are appointed into the services. What is nepotism? What is that? Badhiya hai explanation. So meaning that both of them, as you can see, that these are the corrupt practices, okay, which is happening in the company. He also saw that why this is happening. Okay? So one of the reason that the more number of people were interested in joining the Indian civil services because it was lucrative. Okay? And lucrative in what sense? On one hand, they are getting the salary from the company. On the other hand, they were allowed to do the private trade. And in this private trade, they're amassing huge amount of money. So if you remember 1773, I asked it for a purpose because in 1773 we have mentioned one provision that 1773 Act banned the private trade. But was it really banned? No. It was only on the paper, but on the ground the things were not banned and still private trade operated. In fact, after 1773, it became much more greater, it became much more in the volume. So now Cornwallis was very strict on this end that somehow you need to stop this particular practice of the private trade. So he effectively banned in between 1785 to 1793. But at the same point of time when he is banning, So the people who are earning in leaps and bounds, their incomes are impacted. So obviously, when the incomes are impacted, the services will not remain too lucrative. So people will stop coming to India. People will stop joining civil services. So what he did, that on one hand, to keep it lucrative and free it from corruption, so on one hand, he executed this firmly, the private trade ban. On the other hand, he raised the salary of the Indian civil servants, and they became one of the highest paid civil servants in the world at this point of time. So, जो लूट का माल था वो छूट में मिल रहा था, ठीक है? This is what happened actually. So first they were looting and now it is given free of cost. Okay? वैसे मत लूटो, ऐसे हम यहाँ से दे रहे हैं, नीचे से ले जाओ, ठीक है? So this is what he did. So now it remained one of the most lucrative services till this point of time. Another thing that he enforced, promotion through seniority. Earlier, the seniority was also favoritism only was there. Okay? So favoritism only was there. So now he enforced promotion through seniority. But despite doing these all good things, he was very much biased. Okay? So Cornwallis was very much biased. In fact, he was highly prejudiced against Indians. And he made a statement at this point of time that every native of Hindustan is corrupt. Okay? So every native of Hindustan is corrupt. And you see that this is what we call double standard. You are seeing that in your company there is hell lot of corruption. You want to end the corruption of your company employees, and you are saying every native of Hindustan is corrupt. Okay? So anyways, whatever his observations, okay? So it is his observation, not our recognition. So now it led to the Europeanization of the civil services. Okay? So he followed, after making this statement, he went with the short-sighted policy of the Europeanization of services, in which it was very clearly mentioned that all the higher posts in administration worth £500 annual salary will be held only by the Englishmen. Okay? No Indian will be holding that kind of position. Okay? So this is what was formally mentioned. Then Cornwallis also did one more thing, that by this point of time, 1793, the district collector, okay, so the revenue collectors, they also had the judicial powers, okay, they were performing the judicial functions also. So he separated the judicial functions of the district collector, and then he was only interested with the revenue collection. So he was left with the revenue collection, and then his judicial powers were separated. Okay? So this is what he did. We mentioned about the Wellesley later on. We mentioned the word civil was used. The word civil was used to differentiate. The word civil was used to differentiate the commercial functions of company, to differentiate the commercial functions of company from its civil and military, commercial functions from, just 1 minute, of company from its military and naval functions, from its military and naval functions. Military and naval functions. Okay? Then mention Cornwallis is considered as the creator of modern civil services, creator of modern civil services in India. Okay? Then you mention the court of directors. The court of directors had the privilege of Indian appointments, which led to favoritism and nepotism, favoritism and nepotism in company, in company. ठीक है? Cornwallis addressed the problem of corruption. Cornwallis addressed the problem of corruption by effectively banning private trade, by effectively banning private trade, private trade. Done. He also enforced promotion through seniority, promotion through seniority. To keep the Indian civil services, full stop, and then you mention, to keep the Indian civil services lucrative for the British, he raised the salaries of civil servants, and they became highest paid civil servants in the world. Highest paid civil servants in the world. Done. Then next you mention highest paid civil servants in the world. In 1793, he came up with Cornwallis Code. Cornwallis Code, which relieved the district collectors, from their judicial function, and they were only allowed to perform their revenue function. ठीक है? Now listen. So Cornwallis, he is gone from India in 1793. Then for 5 years, another person was the Governor General, John Soar, I think. And then after, Wellesley has come to power in 1798. So last year in 2020, there was easy question taken from this section only in the exam, prelims exam. So Wellesley, when he has come to India, so he decided that he will create a separate civil servant training institute in Fort William. Okay? So he started a separate civil servant training college in Fort William to train the civil servants. But what happened that the court of directors, they disapproved his action and they created the training college at Haileybury in England. Okay? Mention. Change paragraph and then you write. Wellesley decided to create a separate civil servant training college at Fort William, Calcutta. But it was disapproved by disapproved by court of directors who created the training college, civil servant training college at Haileybury in England. Haileybury in England by 1806. By 1806. ठीक है? 1806. Now listen. So after the Wellesley, the next person. See, and moreover, one more thing I need to emphasize over here. When we are talking about the pillars of this administration of the company, so we are talking only from the perspective of the company till 1857. So our focus on this organization is till 1857, not beyond that. Okay? So beyond that, then the company's rule ends and then the crown rule comes. Okay? So now just listen. So when William Bentinck was there, so as we mentioned that it was the centralization of the Indian administration. So in centralization many ways. Okay? So when Governor General has become too powerful, so he also made the position of the district collector too powerful. Okay? Very powerful. So what he did, okay? There are 2-3 changes that we mean to mention over here. That first of all, that by this point of time there was one more office that was known as the SP, Superintendent of Police, meant for the law and order administration. Okay? So he abolished the office of SP, William Bentinck, and gave all the powers of law and order to district collector. Okay? So district collectors. Then moreover, in the judicial aspect, what he has done, that he has also abolished the provincial courts and given the power of the provincial courts to the judicial commissioners, who were basically district collectors. So that is one thing. That today, in today's perspective, if anybody asks you in your family that what your son is doing, what your daughter is doing, so they say that they are preparing for the IS exam. So that IS exam, actually it was made too powerful, the IS position, by William Bentinck. He gave so much of power to the district collectors that they were often regarded as the Mai Baap of the area. This is the word which they have used in their text, that Britishers were regarded as the Mai Baap of the people. They were considered as the other form of the god. Though in terms of benefits must percolate down to the people in that terms, not in the terms of the exploitation. So he is the one who made them too powerful, and this is what we call centralization of all the powers in few hands only. Okay? So judiciary wala yahan nahi likhenge. We will write in the judiciary part. You write about the office of SP wala part. So you write later William Bentinck abolished the office of SP, Superintendent of Police, the office of SP, Superintendent of Police, and gave all the charges of law and order administration to the district collector. Okay? Now listen the part that we are not going to write. Okay? Just listen. So we can cover it at the other place, but not here. So see that by 1857 these were the developments. Okay? After that there were many committees and commissions were created. So for example, okay, in 1884 there was a commission which was created, Atchison Commission. Okay? So Atchison Commission called for the reforms in the civil services, whereby it maintained that the number of the Indians must increase in this exam. Okay? That it's been long time that the civil services has been thrown open to Indians, but the system of the recruitment, the scheme of the exam, the syllabus of the exam, it's not favoring. So this is what he mentioned. They also said that covenanted word must be done away with. Okay? So done away with. Then that nothing fell on the ears of the authority, and one of the very important recommendation of the Atchison was that exam must be conducted in India. Okay? that it is difficult for everyone, that those who are meritorious, they cannot, but they are not rich, so they cannot go to the Britain. But none of the recommendations fell on the ears of the British. Then in 1919, there was a Montfort Commission. Okay? Montfort Commission is the one which said that finally the covenanted word was removed, and moreover it called for the examination in India. So finally from 1920s examination started to be conducted in India. So do you know that where was the first place where exam was conducted? Which area? Which place? कुछ तो बोलो. Calcutta. ठीक है? So it was Allahabad. So exam was conducted in Allahabad. It's all started from the Allahabad. Okay? And moreover, if today Allahabad is an important place of the UPSC preparation, so the legacy goes back to this particular age only. In fact, before the UPSC building in the Delhi, it was in Allahabad. Okay? So UPSC originally was in Allahabad, and then it got transferred after independence to this particular place. Okay? Delhi. So what is the name of the building in Delhi? Dholpur House. Okay? So whose building is that? बिना पढ़ाए पूछ रहा हूँ, ठीक है? So actually it belonged to the Maharaja of the Sirohi dynasty. ठीक है? So it was the house of the property of the Maharaja of the Sirohi dynasty. They are the one who gave it to the government of India. The place where your interviews will happen. ठीक है? So that dome part, and there are the galleries, and in these galleries there are the rooms. So that is the Dholpur House. So it was gifted to the government of India, and then it became the UPSC building. Okay? So last was the 1924 Lee Commission, and Lee Commission further recommended that Indians, okay, their numbers must increase, and it further said that within 15 years there must be a parity between the British civil servants and Indian civil servants, meaning that from 1925 if you count, so by 1940 50% Indian civil servant and 50% British civil servant. So you can just see that still by 1940s that majority of the civil servants were not Indians. They were just closer to 45 to 40% who were the part of the civil services. Okay? So we will do this exercise later on. I have just mentioned you that what all things unfolded. After the break we will start with the army. Okay? Chalo. And if you say, I'll keep the break short, we'll leave you little early. 5 minute ka break kare? Will be fine? Chalo. Done. So mention, next topic, the British Army. The British Army. So now, so listen, when it comes to the British Army, so first we need to differentiate that there were two such types in the British Army. So it can be divided into two branches, and one part is called as Queen's Army, and the second one was Troops Army. So the major difference, that this was the minor section of the army and this was the major section of the army. Okay? Moreover, don't write, just let me explain, then you can mention. So minor section of the army and major section. Moreover, this was the army of occupancy. Okay? So this was army of occupancy and this was army of expansion. Okay? So army of occupancy and army of expansion. Then majority, this Queen's Army, in this all the people were British. Okay? So majority of them are British, not only majority, but in fact more than 90% were British. Okay? But this is the one army which is the largest section of the army. In this, all the officers, okay, the high officials were British, and the soldiers or the sepoys were Indians. Okay? So soldiers and sepoys were Indians. So what do we mean by the army of occupancy and then army of the expansion? So it is the troops army which was responsible for the British expansion in India, and not only in India but also in the other areas closer to India, for example Myanmar, okay, Burma, then South Africa, okay, then Sri Lanka. So these all areas. So it was an army of expansion. So it means that they are the one who are fighting the battles, okay? They are the one who are annexing the areas and including it in the British territory. While what is the army of the Queen's army? So army of occupancy means that they don't fight, okay? They are the symbol of the British hold over India. So for example, suppose Bengal, from Bengal we started, okay? So Bengal is occupied by the British, okay? So is occupied by the British, and there was a troops army which was responsible for fight in Battle of Palasi and Battle of Buxar, okay? So Battle of Buxar. So now the troops army has fought the battle, but after the battle is over, the army, the Queen's army is occupying the area. It is living in that particular area, and which is basically showing the British ultimate hold over India. Then the troops army, it has moved on from that place to the Mysore. They are focusing on there. Then after Mysore has been captured, the troops army is moving on to Maratha episode, fighting the war. So they are always in war. They are fighting the battle. And whenever the battle is over, that area has come under the area of the British. So then the occupancy army would be stationed. Okay? Now you can mention. So British army can be classified in following two types. So number one, you mentioned Queen's army. Okay? Queen's army. So in this you write, it was mainly constituted of British, and it was minor section of the army. Minor section of the army. Full stop. It was an army of occupancy. It was an army of occupancy which symbolized the ultimate hold of British, over India. Ultimate hold of British over India. Done? Then next you mention army, troops army. So right, it was the major section of the army. It was the major section of the army. Though all the higher officials were British, but majority of the sepoy, SEPOY, majority of the sepoy were Indians. Majority of the sepoy were Indian, or soldiers you can mention if you don't want to write sepoy. Then you mention Indians. It was an army of expansion. It was an army of expansion which was fighting battles, not only in India but also outside India. Done. So these were the two types of army. Then now listen. So since we are mentioning that this is the minor one, but more important is this one. Okay? So troops army is the most important. So now when we really look at the what constitutes the British army, so at the time of the 1857 revolt, 86% composition of the British army was Indian. Okay? So 86% is big enough. Okay? And it seems that it is not a British army, it is an Indian army. Okay? When 86% are people are Indian, so better call Indian army. And 14% were the Britishers. So why keeping that? Why they are not keeping Britishers in large numbers, and why they are keeping Indians in large numbers? So first of all, keeping a British army would have been a very expensive affair for the British. Okay? So earlier, no, we haven't mentioned earlier, but in fact, the system was that the Indian soldier, okay, Indian sepoy, he was paid 1/3 of the salary as compared to the British sepoy. So on the same level, same rank, a British, if he is paid 300, so then Indian will be paid 100. So it is very cheaper for the British. Okay? So very cheaper for the British to keep an Indian army. And moreover, they controlled the army by keeping the entirely British officers. Okay? So this is one part. Then another thing that we mentioned on a professional level, okay, that Indians were highly discriminated in this, particularly in terms of payment. Then, so in terms of payment discrimination, relative deprivation I'm talking about. The other aspect we will mention further. Relative, I hope you understand what is relative deprivation. That Indians paid 100 and then others paid for the same work 300. So anyways, that is one part. Another thing that the highest position that an Indian could reach in the army was the position of the Subedar. Okay? So it is just in line with the policy of the Cornwallis, short-sighted policy of the Cornwallis, that Europeanization of the services. Okay? Did we mention this part? He followed short-sighted. नहीं लिखा था ना? Space है तुम लोगों के उसमें? Just let me see that have we mentioned. So let me complete this part. थोड़ी सी जगह छोड़ देना, last में हम ऐड कर देंगे. ठीक है? So just listen this, let's complete this part. So what we were mentioning, that it was in line with the short-sighted policy of the Cornwallis, that Europeanization of the services by keeping all the higher posts reserved for the British. Okay? Then it is very surprising for us that how the handful of Britishers were able to control such a large Indian army. So it was because of the two important reasons. So these two important reasons, the number one, that there was no such sense of nationalism in India at this point of time. One can ask a question that why there is no sense of nationalism at this point of time. So India was that we had a composite culture. We were expressed as a Rashtra or nation in many such old texts, but in reality, it is a country of the thousands of monarchies. Okay? And by the time, I think I have mentioned this many a times, that 1947 when India became free, so at that point of time, one of the biggest challenge before India was the integration of the princely states. Okay? And in Indian Union, 565 princely states were integrated, and in the Pakistan 289. So this is almost more than 900. Okay? So this is the condition at the time of the independence. So what would have been 100 years earlier? Okay? So thousands of monarchies are there, and when there would be the monarchies, every monarchy will like to preserve its own freedom. It will not go into the concept of a pan-Indian nation concept. So there was no sense of nationalism. Okay? That is one. Then the second one, the Indian tradition. Okay? The Indian tradition of loyalty towards salt. Okay? In Hindi में क्या बोलते हो? नमक, नमक का कर्ज, नमक हलाली. Halali or haram? Halal. Yes. So this is the Indian tradition of loyalty towards salt, that whoever is giving you the employment, okay, he is kind of a person that must be given accorded respect. So they displayed their loyalty, except few cases, but in majority of the scenario, they accorded respect to the British. Moreover, British were also good in the beginning in one particular regard, that is, that if Indians are proving to be the good mercenaries, so British were also good paymaster. Here we are not talking about the discrimination. Here we are talking about the regular payment. Okay? So regular payment, timely payment, and moreover, okay, the payment which was given to Indians in the Indian scenario, it was not too less. It becomes only too less when it is compared with the British sepoy. Okay? So British were good paymaster. They made the timely payment. So timely payment is happening. So that is a one very important thing when you are working in an organization, when you get the timely payment. Okay? So no, I am talking about some other organization. This the little smirk on your face, तुम्हें लगता है कि मैं यहाँ की बात कर रहा हूँ? कहीं कभी भी नहीं. मैं बोल ही नहीं सकता ऐसा. So now listen. So this is why that they were able to maintain a very Indian nature army, okay? And they were quite successful in their endeavor till the 1850s. It's only after 1850 the things started to get ruined. And things started to get ruined when this episode of the 1857 is going to happen. That episode particularly the Enfield rifles. We will talk in the next class. Okay? The Enfield rifle episode, whereby the religious feelings of the Indian sepoys were hurt. But uske pehle they were quite good in that. So that's how the British Army operated. You mentioned. So by the time of, change paragraph and then you write, by the time of 1857 revolt, by the time of 1857 revolt, 86% of the British Indian Army, 86% of the British Indian Army was comprised of Indians. Was comprised of Indians. Full stop. It is very surprising. It is very surprising that handful of British were able to control such a large Indian nature army. Such a large Indian nature army. Full stop. Keeping an entirely British army would have been a very costly affair. Would have been a very costly affair. As such, all the sepoys were Indians, and high officials were British. High officials were British. Done? Then he mentioned there were two important reasons. Which explain the effectiveness of British. Number one, mention absence of nationalism. Number two, the Indian tradition of loyalty towards salt. loyalty towards salt. Full stop. As such, the Indians proved to be a good mercenary, and the British were good paymaster. British were good paymaster. British were good paymaster. Okay. So the deterioration in the army, we are going to mention in the 1857 revolt. Okay? That what all deteriorations were there. Basically, when we cite the reasons of the revolt, which are the military reasons, so there we cite the reasons. Okay? That what wrong has happened in the army, whereby the mutineers, they were from the army. Okay? So now the last pillar you write, that is the police organization. The police organization. Police organization. Okay? So now listen little bit. Before moving into the police topic, first we need to go back to the medieval times. Okay? So listen, that when we talked about the Akbar's time and then Mansabdari system, so what we mentioned at that point of time, Jagirdar, Jamindar, we differentiated between their functions, their rights, and then also their grants. So what we mentioned in the Zamindar, that he was the traditional hereditary landlord class of India, and moreover he has the rights of revenue collection, and moreover he also maintained the law and order in his area, and that is the police function, law and order function. The question is that who maintained law and order in the Mughal area? Army? Zamindar? What else? Jagirdar? Subedar? ठीक है? रिश्तेदार? See, I think I mentioned in the class. मैं कुछ बोला था मैंने क्लास में उसके specific. Yes? You're closer to that. ठीक है? At least. ठीक है? नहीं. अब छोड़ो दो, सारे दारों को छोड़ दो. ठीक है? ठीक है? So listen. See that at the Mughal time, अब फिर से वापस से वो topic clear होगा. ठीक है? What we mentioned about the Jagirdar, their function was not law and order. ठीक है? Their only function that they had the revenue collection rights, and then they needed to maintain the army for the emperor. ठीक है? They are not at all interested with the law and order administration. So basically, the Mughal law and order administration, and that is the pre-colonial India. So pre-colonial India, the law and order administration, there were specific officers for it. ठीक है? So these specific officers, number one, Faujdar. ठीक है? Then were after the Faujdar were Kotwal. Okay? They were the officers responsible for it. And then also Amils. So Amils had two functions. Okay? That Amils also collected the revenue and they also performed the law and order function. Okay? So these were the specific officers who were meant for the law and order administration. Okay? But they did not create an organization like Jagirdari or Mansabdari for the law and order function. Done? So this was the system. Moreover, as we mentioned in Zamindari areas, okay? So in Jagirdari areas, these people were maintaining law and order. In Zamindari area, Zamindars are maintaining the law and order. Moreover, Zamindars maintained a troop of the Lathedars, okay? And these Lathedars were called as Thanedar, okay? So these Lathedars, why they are called as Lathedar? Because they are carrying the Lathas, okay? Dandas, okay? So, and that's what continued even till this point of time, that the lower constabulary, they are not given the weapons, okay? They are given the lathas, and from that latha only Ajmal Kasab was captured. You know that incident? Yes, he used his lathi only, and with that lathi only he captured him, okay? So he could have died, that particular person who has captured, okay? He died also. हाँ, died capturing him, ठीक है? But at least capture तो कर लिया, ठीक है? So listen, so Lathedar, why they were called as Lathedar? Because they were carrying this lathi and their original names was Thanedar, ठीक है? So They were the one who were maintaining it. Now what happened in 1785 to 93 when Cornwallis has come? In fact, it is Cornwallis, whenever you are in confusion, that in between 1780 to that 1800, whatever initiatives are there, don't be confused. Write the name of the Cornwallis. It will always be correct. Because he is there at every place. Be judiciary, be the army, be the police, take a civil services everywhere. So what he did, that at this point of time when Bengal has come under the control of the British, so now the zamindari position is not very important position at this time, and what is happening that he relieved the zamindars from the function of law and order administration. Then, and there was a reason. It is a good initiative which Cornwallis did. From majority of the zamindars, their thanedars, what they were doing, that they were giving free pass to the dacoits. Okay? Free pass to the dacoits. Basically, they are the one who must stop the dacoits from entering to the villages. But they just allowed them, okay? And dacoits are entering into the village, looting the people, and they shared the loot with the thanedars. And some of the thanedars, they are passing it to zamindars also. So this was the news which was very much there at that point of time when it reached to the Cornwallis. Cornwallis relieved the zamindars from law and order function, and it is he who constituted the police organization. So he is the founder of the police organization in India. Then what he did, so after that creating this, he divided districts into many circles, okay? And these circles were known as Thana, okay? So these circles he named as Thana, and an Indian officer was appointed at this circle who was known as Daroga, okay? So Daroga. Then it is Cornwallis who created the office of SP, Superintendent of Police at district level. Mention. You're right. So pehle pre-colonial India likho, that what happened in pre-colonial India. So you write, in pre-colonial India, during the Mughal time, there were specific officers for law and order administration. Specific officers for law and order administration. Like, so you can mention like Faujdar, Kotwal, and Amils. ठीक है, and Amils. अच्छा, who is Chaukidar? So, no, but I'm asking from the, you're right, but the pre-colonial perspective. What is his function? Law and order only, ठीक है? The lowest level officer was Chaukidar. Basically, गांव में जो किसी गली में पहरे देते हैं, the people who are actually yes, safeguarding the law and order in that particular area. So the lowest level officer was the Chaukidar. ठीक है? So you can also write his name, Amils and Chaukidars. Then Amils and Chaukidars. Then you write after full stop, in zamindari areas, zamindars maintained a troop of lathedar. These words same you will have to write. A troop of lathedars who were known as thanedar. For the purpose of law and order administration. ठीक है? Then mention these thanedars often colluded with Dacoits often colluded with dacoits and shared the loot. And shared the loot. Then you mention Cornwallis. Cornwallis, when assumed responsibility, Cornwallis, when assumed responsibility, relieved zamindars from law and order function. Zamindars from law and order function. He decided to create the police organization. He decided to create the police organization under the command of company. Under the command of company. Command of company. Full stop. Command of company. Then you write, he divided districts into many circles. He divided districts into many circles known as Thana. Known as Thana. He divided districts into many circles known as Thana. An Indian officer was appointed at Thana. An Indian officer was appointed at Thana known as Daroga. Known as Daroga. Then you write, at district level, he created office of superintendent of police. He created office of superintendent of police. Superintendent of police. Done? So now listen. So the next change already we have mentioned, but we'll write once again. So William Bentinck, okay? He has come to power, and then what he did? He abolished the office of SP and gave all the charges to the district collector. Okay? Mention. William Bentinck abolished the office of SP. Abolished the office of SP and gave all the charges to district collector. All the charges to district collector. Done? Just give me your copy. Let's see that what I have left in the civil services, so we can write it. So you don't need to write it over here. हम last में भी note करके लिख सकते हैं, ठीक है? So last में note करके लिखो, ठीक है? Note, mention a note, and add कर सकते हो note on civil services, ठीक है? Civil services, ठीक है? Done. So you mention. Already I have shared with you. So you mention. Cornwallis was highly prejudiced. Cornwallis was highly prejudiced against Indians. Highly prejudiced against Indians. Then you write, he made a statement he made a statement that all the natives of Hindustan, he made a statement that all the natives of Hindustan are corrupt. Are corrupt. Then he adopted the short-sighted policy. He adopted the short-sighted, S-H-O-R-T, short-sighted policy of Europeanization of services. Europeanization of services. Then you mention in 1793, it was officially laid down. It was officially laid down that all the higher post in administration, worth 500 pound, annual salary, 500 pound annual salary will be held by only English people. ठीक है? So this is what was his short-sighted policy, and in fact एक आर्मी वाला भी ऐड कर लो इसमें, ठीक है? The highest position that an Indian could reach in the army was the post of Subedar. ठीक है? So meaning that in all the spheres they are maintaining that the high officials would be from the British side. ठीक है? They would not be from the Indian side. So we are at a juncture where we are at the topic of the judicial organization, but it needs little bit of time because there are n number of the flow charts. So we'll do it in the tomorrow's class. ठीक है? चलो, I am winding up class here. Done? Thank you.